Could you tell us where the name Garden River comes from?
Where Garden River comes from? Well, it comes from Anishinaabe. Essentially, it's Garden River. The French priests, when they first showed up here, when they returned, the Jesuits there, Father Kohler and those guys in the 1800s called this, Rivière au Désert, which is an old French for Garden River. Then it flipped to Garden River in English, but it goes back to what we called it. That the Europeans seem to have stuck with the term because supposedly the trees reminded them of a well-kept garden at the mouths of the rivers. Be all the white pines, nice and straight. And they also noticed that we planted corn at the mouths and a few other things that we just generally left for the year. So that's kind of how the name got. But we always got it, from my knowledge, it's always been in our language, Anishinaabe. So.
Could you tell us about the Battle of Point Iroquois?
The Battle of Point Iroquois, as we know, was on the American side. And I always find it interesting because whenever I've read about it or heard people talk about it, it varies from a few hundred Iroquois warriors to 5,000 to 6,000. And it's kind of humorous. It's like, really? So the numbers are important, but not important because nobody kept good track of the numbers at that time. It was more about the fact that we stopped the Iroquois from coming up here, because prior to this battle in the late 1600s, the Iroquois had driven away the Huron, destroyed the Teontate, destroyed the Neutral. They basically destroyed the Susquehannock and all sorts of people. They're raiding into the Illinois country. They're raiding up and along the North Shore Lake Huron. They're coming across through Michigan, depopulating huge areas either through driving people away, killing them, or just taking them prisoner. And they finally got enough nerve to come up to here. And as the story goes, they killed either two people or a family. And these people's bodies were found. So we knew they were coming. Sentries at the points of land or watchers at the points of land watched for them when we spotted them. Calls went out to all our allies, and a significant force showed up. And once the Iroquois went through and camped at Iroquois, our people waited till the sun was rising in the morning and came down at them. Came down with the suns behind our back into where they were camped and basically destroyed them. Two guys were left alive, and after a special treatment, were placed back in a canoe with the Iroquois were told never to come up here again. And they seemed to listen. That was, I think, the start of the Anishinaabe driving the Iroquois out of southern Ontario. Over the next 20 or 30 years, they drove them out of southern Ontario. So.
Could you tell us about the pageant of St. Luzon?
The pageant of St. Luzon, it's a big deal for Europeans because it establishes their claim over Sault Ste. Marie. So when this Frenchman showed up in the area with some priests, proclaimed that the King of France owned the land, all the way down the Mississippi and things, erected a cross, erected a coat of arms. Supposedly the Anishinaabe and other assembled First Nations, Dakota, I think some Illinois and others who the French could convince to show up. Supposedly we nodded our assent, said yes, we accept this, we accept that we are your children, although the translations apparently, when you read the documents, were somewhat questionable, to say the least. And this was all done. They had a big feast, fired some guns off. Supposedly everything was okay. St. Luzon, his entourage packed up, headed back for Quebec City. Once the area was vacated by the French, our ancestors took the cross and pitched it in the river and took the coat of arms down and supposedly pitched it in the river too. I mean, we knew what they were doing and we didn't consent. But that, establishes their claim to this area. Show up and make a speech.
Could you tell us about the relationship between the Anishinaabe and the French when Sault Ste. Marie was considered to be a part of New France?
It was okay. Sault Ste. Marie, largely because there wasn't a significant French presence here. There was a fort. The King of France granted a seigneury to a man in this region, but he was never able to populate it. I mean, it was mainly a man by the name of Cadeau who came up, and he married into the Anishinaabe himself, so all his children were Anishinaabe or Métis, depending how you want to describe them. So I would say it was pretty good because there was a fort with a handful of French troops in it, commanded by a sergeant. Not a lot of reason to give grief, right? When the traders came through, the voyageurs, Coup de Bois, and those guys, problems could ensue.
Why did Chingwacones want to move his people from Sault Ste. Marie to Garden River in 1838?
Chinook really didn't move the people to Garden River. There was already people there. There was a small settlement of Chinook and some other band members in and around the old stone house. That was where the center of the Anglican mission was. It was also, prior to that, as you know, Ermitinger's fur trading residence. So people always camped out in that area. Not Ermitinger. William McMurray, the second Anglican missionary up here, married into the community, married Charlotte Johnston from the other side of the river. And she and her family are tied in through trade and family connections to people in the area. So Chinook and some people stayed around there, plus it was their mission site. What happens is, and by 1838, is McMurray is gone. He was pulled out because the governor of Lower Canada, the lieutenant governor of Lower Canada at that point, wanted to convince everybody in Sault Ste. Marie along the North Shore and into southern Ontario to relocate to Manitoulin Island, which we didn't want to do. Actually, a lot of people didn't want to do that. So there's that. So, the people were gone. Chinook and his people were being pressured to move to Manitoulin Island. There was increasing amount of disease in Sault Ste. Marie. But in the late 1830s, so 36, 37, 38, you're getting cholera coming in, which is a new disease. Yeah, it's quite a nasty thing when it's first new. So people were trying to get away from the whites, and Sault Ste. Marie being a major shipping point for ships coming and going and people coming and going, tourists, the American military personnel on the other side of the river, and then people heading through Lake Superior to do whatever they wanted to do. It was a good idea to get out of Sault Ste. Marie. And then the other reason is the Chinook was relocating and meeting up with the rest of the people at Garden River as a way of getting away from government influence, white influence. And it was in an area where there was still good land to farm. It was one of the better areas to farm. And it was also it was a traditional area where people had camped and been for many years too, besides Sault Ste. Marie. So we just kind of got out of the area because of problems here and moved down. Plus, apparently, William McMurray complained of this in, I think, 1835 or 36, that there was, for every house in Sault Ste. Marie, for every other house in Sault Ste. Marie was a grog shop. Right, so every other house sold alcohol. Every other house did this. It was quite, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario was quite the disaster in 36, 37, I think. So people were just trying to get away, move to an area where they could, maintain their sovereignty, their community, and stuff.